Hello, BookTube. For the last month, you have watched as Adrian and Dalton over at Strip Cover Lit and yours truly here at this channel have ripped apart Cormac McCarthy's post-apocalyptic novel, The Road, on many grounds: dialogue, pacing, personality, plot, or the lack thereof. One of my major complaints with it myself was that it totally forgoes the careful world building that is an integral part of science fiction and an integral part of post-apocalyptic novels. It's no good to make the apocalypse itself vague if you're going to make it inconsistent. And there's no good making it inconsistent if you haven't first made it vague. So The Road disappoints on all those levels. And I thought, what better opportunity, since I put you through that, what better opportunity to restart our starter kit series than by doing a starter kit of post-apocalyptic fiction. Starting with, the very basic definition of terms, of course. A post-apocalyptic novel is a novel in which the normal course of events, the normal course of society, life, characters' lives, is drastically interrupted by a single discrete event that ruins everything. As opposed to, for instance, dystopian fiction, where things just sort of gradually go to heck. Post-apocalyptic fiction needs an apocalypse. It needs something discrete to happen, and for that thing to then have a series of catastrophic consequences. And what's left for post-apocalyptic novelists is to decide the timing. Do you want to set your novel... do you want your novel to be about that apocalypse as it happens? Or the most popular... choice by far, I think, just numerically, do you want your novel to take place immediately after that apocalypse? So days, weeks, months, a few years, but not much more than that. Or, in some other cases, do you want your novel to be post-apocalyptic in the sense that the apocalypse happened a long time ago and is either not remembered at all or is remembered in myth? And you're still dealing with the after effects, usually radiation, but the event itself is long over. If you're going to be a writer of that, or if you're a reader with specific taste, you're going to want to decide on those. Our 10 choices on this list fit all of those bills, starting, of course, with Alas, Babylon by Pat Frank, which was written in 1959, and it, I think, could be you could loosely call it still happening. We get introduced to the lives of our characters before there is an apocalypse, and the apocalypse is nuclear. And then we watch, they live in a small town in Florida, and we watch as they try to figure out what's going on and try to survive the immediate after effects. And there was the post-apocalyptic genre, the subgenre of post-apocalyptic fiction, has become enormously popular in the last 15 years. Self-published novels, oh my God, there are 10 every day. And there's a good reason for that. When Pat Frank, the author who's known as Pat Frank, wrote his book, those of you who are young will not know this. You will not remember what this was like. But we lived every day, every single day, morning, noon, and night. First thought in the morning, last thought at night, thinking that this kind of an apocalypse was going to happen. That the United States and the Soviet Union were going to have a full-blown nuclear exchange, which would ruin life on Earth. It would be post-apocalyptic. Not everyone would die right away, probably, but everything would change. Everything would change completely. On a day-to-day level, on an hour level, on a minute level, the future would end, and we would all suddenly become scavengers in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. That was on Pat Frank's mind, I guarantee you, and the minds of a whole bunch of other authors on this list. And that was the form it took. And you would think, well, okay, the Soviet Union disappeared, so why are these novels on the increase instead of the decrease? And the reason is because when we were all anticipating and worrying about a nuclear apocalypse, it never crossed our minds, never, that the apocalypse that we would end up having to worry about would be the climate. And that it wouldn't be hypothetical, that it would actually happen, as opposed to we don't know whether or not the Soviets will attack. We don't know whether or not some drunken nuclear technician will make a mistake on a nuclear submarine, and that'll be that. Set off a chain reaction that kills us all. At the time, we didn't know, and the uncertainty was part of the problem. It was part of why it preyed on our minds. Climate change, we know you can see it coming. Storms the size of continents that last for days, that wipe out everything in their path. Heat waves that make whole continents, like, for instance, Australia, completely uninhabitable, except maybe on certain fringes of the coast. Things like that. An increased carbon level that makes photosynthesis into a rare phenomenon, or starts a runaway greenhouse effect. We have a planet in our solar system that had that happen to it. and as a result, lead melts on the surface of Venus, and life is impossible there. so I think that's why post-apocalyptic novels are on the uptake, because no matter what form the author gives to the apocalypse in the book, we're all facing that again in a way that none of us imagined. Even science fiction writers didn't usually imagine it back in the 1950s and 60s. But anyway, the next book on the list is famous. Of course, a lot of you will have seen the great movie. It's On the Beach by Neville Shute. And it is another example of a post-apocalyptic novel in which the apocalypse is still happening. There has been a massive nuclear exchange, and the world is irradiated, essentially. There are massive clouds of deadly radiation just sort of moving with the world's air currents. And there's a small group of people in Australia who are so far spared, but they are, as far as they know, alone, and they also know they're doomed. They know those air currents are coming their way, and there's nothing they can do about it. At least a whole bunch of extreme behavior on their part, and also a couple of fantastic moments where they dare to hope that they might not be alone. A terrific book. I don't usually give Neville Shute high marks as a writer, but he did a really good job with On the Beach. And then the next one, number 3, would be Walter Miller's 1959 novel, A Canticle for Leibowitz. And it is a perfect example of a book that mostly is about the long after effect of an apocalypse. The early part of the book, we get what the immediate aftermath of an apocalypse would be like. But the most memorable parts of the book are about what happens when that is long in the past, when the damages that the apocalypse does to society and to the world have been incorporated into a new society and a new religion and a new worldview. Utterly fascinating, rightly revered, I think, as a classic of science fiction. Then our next one, number 4, would be George Stewart's 1949 novel, Earth Abides. A tiny bit overlooked among post-apocalyptic novels. This one, the apocalypse is a disease, mysterious disease, a distinct possibility in real life in the 21st century, far more distinct than a lot of people like to think. All it would take is for a pathogen. Pathogens right now, the ones that are broken out, the super pathogens that are broken out, made headlines briefly and then been curtailed, only did a couple of things wrong. And that's all. And if they hadn't done those couple of things wrong, then that would be it. That would be the only thing that anyone would be talking about. And tens of millions of people would be dead. Those pathogens were young. They were new. They were newly transferred from the animal world to the human world. They had not adapted. And so they were defeatable. But an intensely communicable, lethal virus that's airborne, and you just have to breathe it to be infected, and that has a 90% mortality rate. The world has gone through that, and the human race was badly gored by it. If humans had not existed on multiple, at the time, unconnected continents, the mortality rates would have been stupendous, perhaps unsustainable. But in Earth Abides is the post-apocalyptic novel that most people who know me always assume will be my favorite, because one of the lone survivors teams up with a beagle. That's not necessarily true. I'm not completely shallow, but it still is a really good book. I'm not 100% sure that Earth Abides is still in print, but you would really enjoy it if you read it. Then let's see. Number 5 is by Larry Niven and Jerry Purnell. This is Lucifer's Hammer, and the hammer in question is a chunk of a comet. So this is not disease, and this is not nuclear. The apocalypse here is a fatal impact on Earth, which is also popular in the current crop of post-apocalyptic fiction, because it could easily happen. because it could easily happen. The Earth is completely defenseless. It has happened many, many times in the planet's history, and it would be catastrophic, absolutely catastrophic. If an object of sufficient size struck the Earth, then the cloud of debris that it would throw into the atmosphere would be, first of all, would not be dispersible, and it would kill photosynthesis. It would kill crops, because the world would be plunged into darkness. Again, we know that this planet has endured that kind of thing before, many times. Just random chance, a perfect illustration of how short a time humanity has been here, that none of these things have happened. But they easily could. That or a supervolcano eruption. But let's see. And in Lucifer's Hammer, by the way, would be another example where the book gives us the apocalypse as it's happening, where the thing is detected, talked about, worried about, attempted to be interfered with, then it happens, then we get a small amount of aftermath. Then the next one, number 6, would be William Brinkley's novel The Last Ship, which is a variation on the full-blown nuclear exchange apocalypse, only this time it's a military vessel that's out of reach of those land-based missiles striking capitals, and that has to figure out what is going to go on, what they're going to do when the firing is over, when all of that is over. What kind of a world will they pick through? Some of you may know the extremely good TV series that was made out of The Last Ship, and you might not have read the book. I don't know if the book was ever reissued when the TV series was on. Sometimes companies will do that. Major, entertainment corporations will remember to bring the book back into print just to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. So I don't remember if that happened or not. But the Last Ship is surprisingly literate. It's a surprisingly good book. Very dense, very meaty, well worth your time. Again, if it's still in print, I'm not really sure. Then the next one, number 7, would be it's S.M. Stirling's Dies the Fire, and in this the apocalypse is not known. So you might say that I'm guilty of hypocrisy because I'm going to praise it, even though the apocalypse here is as unexplained as the apocalypse in The Road. But there's a difference between an apocalypse that's unexplained and an apocalypse that is vague. The thing that happens in S.M. Stirling's book, Dies the Fire, is discrete. All higher technology stops working. There's a flash, and then all higher technology stops working. Planes fall out of the skies, combustion engines don't work anymore, even gunpowder. You strike it on a rock, it flashes for a second, and then stops burning. Nothing works at all. It's like a gigantic sustained electromagnetic pulse, only with added benefits because it seems directed. It seems that something doesn't want there to be any higher technology anywhere on Earth. And S.M. Stirling spends not only the whole of Dies the Fire exploring in minute detail the specifics of that change, which is called the change, but then he spends 100,000 subsequent books doing it. There's a level of consistent and world-building detail in it that is nowhere even gestured at in The Road. And boy, oh boy, is Dies the Fire good. Oh boy, it is. It takes place in the Pacific Northwest. The S.M. Stirling saves himself some trouble by not having any of it take place in any of the big cities, because he is under the impression that if such a thing were to happen, big cities would become death zones right away. Horrible, cannibalistic death zones right away. That's what he calls them, in fact. That there'd be no chance at all. If you're living on, on the 30th floor of a high-rise of condos, and all technology stops in the middle of Manhattan without any warning, then there's no way you'll even make it to a sustainable countryside before you die, or before you kill someone for food. The Pacific Northwest is rural enough so that doesn't happen, and he follows two groups of good guys and one very silly, hissable group of bad guys. And even in the first book, I mean, the story goes on for book after book after book, but even in the first book, it's amazingly involving. Just amazingly involving. I think it's terrific, and I know it's still in print, so you can still get it. Then our next one, what are we up to? 8? Would be Russell Hoban's 1980 book, Ridley Walker. A very strange novel. I think brilliant. Every time I read it, I'm more impressed by it. And it's a novel in which the apocalypse happened a long time ago, and society has completely restructured around the changes. So the world that we are in with its weird patois and its weird social customs and its weird physical localities is all the byproduct of that apocalypse. It's all the result of that, but no one knows that. No one in the world of Ridley Walker knows that. They're just living in their own world. It's left to us to know. Utterly fascinating. Just an utterly fascinating work of science fiction. Not well enough known, I think. And then our last two, are a little on the odd side. Number 9 it's a post-apocalyptic series. The apocalypse was nuclear. There were missiles exchanged. And then the world fell to pieces and became populated from stem to stern with grotesque, flesh-bubbling mutants. Horrible, cannibalistic, deliverance-style humanoid creatures of every kind. Except for all the beautiful women who are their captives and who somehow managed to have no genetic blemishes whatsoever, and except for our hero, Martin Stone, a vest-wearing, boot-polished super hottie who was in a military bunker when the whole thing happened and now is just riding his Harley with apparently inexhaustible supply of fuel and talking with his gigantic and gnarly badass pit bull as he just tries to make his way through this weird, wretched world. Books like the Cutthroat Cannibal or the Rabid Brigadier or the last book in the series. The series is called The Last Ranger. Martin Stone is the Last Ranger. And the last book in the series is called Is This the End? And the whole series is by Craig Sargent, and it is absolutely ridiculous from start to finish. And so much fun. It is so much fun. It is the funnest post-apocalyptic fiction that you will ever read. Martin Stone he's captured many times. He's tortured many times. He fights and wins whenever he can. His pit bull is always of some help to him. And no matter what kind of danger he's in, no matter how close he is to being dunked into a cooking cauldron in the middle of a cannibalistic commune, he always finds time to make a little time with those beautiful women. It's just weird escapist fiction from start to finish. And the series, Is This the End? It conclusively ends, let's just put it that way. There are no cliffhangers at the end of that last book. You know for sure where this series is going. I think The Last Ranger, I think all the novels in the Last Ranger series are out of print. This is one rare instance in which I would say good. They should be. They are pure garbage. But if you ever are at a flea market or used books of any kind, and you see one of these little mass markets, oh my God, do yourself a favor. You'll see what I mean. If you read even one of them, you don't have to read them in order. And if you read even one of them, you'll see what I mean. But I couldn't leave it off a post-apocalyptic starter kit, now could I? And the last book we'll deal with, number 10, is the strangest example on the list. It's Ursula Le Guin's novel, The Lathe of Heaven, which is about a young man named George Orr, who has bad dreams. Or rather, he has good and bad dreams. But the bad thing about them is they're what he calls effective dreaming. When he dreams and then wakes up in the morning, his dream has become reality. He's the only one who knows this. But it's bothering him. Of course, it's bothering him. He would like not to be worried with such things. He would like not to have the reality rug pulled out from his feet every morning. So he goes to a psychiatrist to ask for drugs to help with sleeping. And in the course of their interaction, the psychiatrist learns from George Orr that his dreams change reality and thinks, oh, well, okay, I've got a lunatic on my hands. Until the psychiatrist tests whether or not it's true and realizes that it is. When he's right next to George Orr when it happens, he is spared enough to remember that it happened and to know that he has the ultimate weapon in his hands. And at first, the urges are all good. Let's dream of a world with no race hatred. The result, instantaneously, the next morning, is that everyone is the same shade of gray. Let's dream of a world united, finally. No more countries squabbling with each other. The solution? Aliens attack. And the nations of Earth band together, sure, but it's not the perfect solution. And the reason why I include it, you'd think that's all sounds fascinating, and it is. Oh my God, The Lathe of Heaven is wonderful. You really should read it. But the reason that it's on my post-apocalyptic starter kit is because at one point, almost as a toss-off note, I never hear people talk about it when they talk about this novel. At one point, George Orr reflects that there was a nuclear exchange, that there was an apocalypse. And there's an image of him staggering around in the aftermath. And a hint that either A, it was the free-flying nuclear energy of this apocalypse that gave him the ability to dream effectively, or that B, he's still on that wasteland, and all of this is a dream. All of it. He's just dreaming this whole thing, and we have been a part of it. One way or another, the book has, as a kernel at its heart, a nuclear apocalypse. So I think it counts. I think it was on Ursula Le Guin's mind when she wrote the book. And I think it's entirely possible, given how mischievous she was, that she left it unresolved intentionally. But there you go. That is a post-apocalyptic starter kit. Not only to get us started with starter kits for 2019, but also as a kind of antidote. I felt I owed you one. A kind of antidote to my read-along of the road. There are some great post-apocalyptic novels out there, and these are just 10 of them. Or 9 of them. But anyway, I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.